is the Bearcast, presented by Bird Culchin Ford. Bird Culchin Ford has been in Waco since 1936. Ford is the #1 selling truck in Texas, 43 years running. The Bearcast is also presented by WellMed Medical Management and USMD Health System Dallas. Here's Craig Smoke and Grayson Grundhafer.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into another edition of the Bearcast on SicEm365.com. And we come to you this week following a massive recruiting weekend for Dave Aranda and the Baylor football team. We've also got some Olympics news to cover as well, and a pretty major decision for the men's basketball team. A very busy week in Baylor Athletics, and we are here to cover it all and to also take your questions. We'll have the mailbag at the end of the episode, as always, to have your questions answered, and we'll get to as many of those as time does allot. I think we'll have a pretty good chance to get to all of those this week, but we will play it by ear because there is, as I mentioned, a lot to talk about. Craig Smoke, SicEm365 radio host, also team and recruiting reporter, joined as always by Grayson Grundhafer, Director of Broadcasting, also team and recruiting reporter for SicEm365. We've also got, I think his name's Armstrong. Is it Armstrong? Anderson, yeah. Something like that. He is with us once again. He's produced a show or two for us in the past. He is back. Armstrong, in all seriousness, good to have you with us, as Jack did a great job filling in last week. But we are whole once again, and we are set to talk a lot of recruiting here, Grayson. But first things first, how was this camp this past weekend? Before we get into the details, just general observations on kind of how things went and how you're feeling this week.
Yeah, really busy weekend, honestly. I mean, with the camp on Saturday and then, of course, on Sunday, the huge official visit weekend, I got to give a huge shout out to Brian Etheridge and, of course, Jack as well for coming out and obviously taking care of the news that we need to break over the weekend. And it was a lot of fun. I mean, those are the kind of weekends that are such a grind and can be really, really tough. But at the end of the day, it's really cool for Baylor fans to be able to stay up to date with what's going on in recruiting. And obviously, after this weekend, I think everyone is kind of seeing the trajectory of Dave Aranda and this staff. I mean, it is something really, really cool to see. And I think everyone finally got a taste of what Dave Aranda and the staff can do on the recruiting trail.
So they're now up to 14 total commits, and the last time we talked to you, they were at 10, right? So 4 commits since the last time we spoke to you, including one that came just a couple of days after. So what we're going to do is we're going to run them down one by one. Grayson will give his thoughts. I'll give my thoughts where they fit, here and there, just in terms of, how it affects the roster and things like that. But let's go ahead and get into it, and then we'll get into some basketball and some Olympics and some mailbag to close things out. The first commit to drop was not over the weekend. It was in the middle of the week, like I mentioned, a couple of days after we did this podcast, and it was Caden Rocky. We've been talking about offensive line a lot. They need a lot of help there going into last week. They had Bryce Simpson out of Cypress. They had Timothy Don out of Camden, Arkansas. They also had Colton Price as well. But now they've added a couple more, and Caden Rocky got the ball rolling on the 4 commits in the last week that we'll be talking about. So the young man from the Woodlands, I know he's got a younger brother who is going to be recruited in the future, who's a couple years younger, that already has pretty much his same offer list. So that's something to watch in the future. But Caden Rocky, what do you like, and what does this commitment mean for the class of 2022?
Yeah, so he camped the first Baylor camp, June 5th, and you saw him out there, and I kind of looked over to Brian, and I was like, who is that? I mean, 6'7", 320 pounds, really tough to miss out on the football field. So a guy who is very physically imposing, and at the camp, he showed some good things. And obviously, the Baylor staff fell in love with what they saw during that camp performance. And Caden also got on SicEm365 radio during the week as well and showed just a great personality. I think culturally, he's a great fit for this Baylor program. Obviously, he adds to the depth on the offensive line. They're trying to find guys who can come in and really contribute as the years progress under Eric Mateos and Jeff Grimes. So I like the pickup. I do think that he is probably one of those guys who a lot of people don't know about. I mean, SMU and Texas Southern are his only other two offers. I feel like a lot of people were kind of thrown off by how quickly he made a decision and how quickly Baylor, was able to land him. Just because everything happened so quickly with him. So yeah, he became offensive lineman number 4 in the class. And again, he just brings a lot of size. I think there's a lot of developing that he still has to do. I think over this next year, it's going to be key for him to continue to grow and get better as a prospect.
I don't know much about Texas Southern. I do see them in the offer list quite a bit for some of the guys that Baylor has been going after, but I do trust SMU's evals. So if they're offering a big old offensive lineman, then I feel pretty good about the fact that Sonny Dykes and company offered, because they seem to be pretty good on the evaluation side of things. And when you think of up-tempo offenses and zooming up and down, scoring a lot of points with some big offensive linemen, they fit that bill as well. So that doesn't make me feel better about the commitment, because I feel good about it regardless. But I do look at that and say, okay, yeah, like I can see where you kind of see some of the same vision, or why there'd be similar interests there.
Yeah, and I will say the other part about this is obviously building somewhat of a pipeline with the Woodlands. Pretty solid football program. And I think if you look at 2024, so his brother Colton is one of the guys who you mentioned. He's obviously going to have a very big recruitment, in my opinion. I think he's going to be a top 300 guy in the entire country. He has that kind of upside, so he might even be better than his brother coming up here really soon. And then they also have probably the number 1 quarterback in the entire state for the 2024 class, Mabry Mature, out of the Woodlands as well. He kind of looks like Trevor Lawrence. So if you ever look him up, he looks very similar at this stage in his career, and he's a 2024 guy. So I think that's just a really interesting dynamic there. I think Mabry will be visiting Baylor probably sometime in July as well. So definitely something to keep an eye on there as Baylor's trying to build a little bit of a pipeline with the Woodlands.
Yeah, they were a really good program when I was in school. That was a long time ago. I think my high school actually had a pretty classic triple overtime loss in the state semifinals to the Woodlands when I was like I was about to graduate or just graduated. I think it might have been my senior year. I'm not quite sure. It was in that ballpark. But, yeah, they are a very solid football program, so not bad to take somebody out of the greater Houston area. And, we'll see in the next couple of years with his brother if that ultimately leads to a brotherly connection on the offensive line at Baylor. But Baylor needs some help on the O-line, and they got some of that with Caden Rocky last week. And did you have any idea? I mean, I'm sure you had some inkling and you kind of, threw it out there somewhat, but did you have an inkling that it would snowball like it did last week with, commits 2, 3, and 4 as we're going to get to? Did you think that was going to be in the cards for last weekend?
Yeah, so I knew Siraki was going to commit because he came on an unofficial visit with his brother. They came back to Baylor. So I knew that one was pretty much a done deal the day that happened. But as far as the weekend goes, I posted on the board that I felt like there would be probably 2 to 3, and there ended up being 3 from the weekend. As far as immediately coming off the weekend, there could be more coming up soon as well. So a lot to definitely dive into and talk about. But this was a great weekend, and I would say 2 of the 3 that committed, I would say were probably 2 of the most likely. The third was definitely one that Baylor worked really, really hard on and built just amazing relationships in order to land him.
Well, you can tell us which one that is because we'll continue running down the list. 3 more commits from the past week. Trey Emery of Mount Pleasant was next, following Caden Rocky, 6'3", 290-pound defensive tackle. Mount Pleasant, you would think of Katie Cannon as being the last Baylor player to come out of that high school. And there was another one before that, but Tevin Elliott was also a Mount Pleasant guy. Not as fun to say his name, though. But that was, a couple of their connections in the past. Hasn't been much of anything here as of late, but now there is with Trey Emery. And, for the folks who want to go, well, I don't see the offers. Why does he only have this offer, that offer? You offer crazy people. Well, okay, Arizona, Arkansas, Auburn, Colorado, Kansas, Oklahoma State, SMU, TCU, Tennessee, UTSA, Va-Tech, Washington State. Is that good enough? I think it is. I think that'll satisfy some folks. Big offer list for Trey Emery, and obviously they need help on the defensive line. So big commit number 2 from last week.
Yeah, and he came by the studio actually after his visit, and it was just great to talk to him. A lot of these kids, obviously, I start talking to, right when they get the Baylor offer, sometimes even before that when they're going through the camp circuit. But Trey was a guy who I remember very vividly when I first started talking to him. He was telling me how, Baylor was his dream school, and a huge part of that was because he grew up watching Katie Cannon. And
that matters, dude. Like, especially I'm from Tyler originally, and that's a town of 100,000 plus. I don't even know what it's at now, probably like 125K. But those small towns, dude, that's legend status when you're a Katie Cannon down there. So I can see where that would still be in play, definitely.
Yeah, and so Joey McGuire, great job in this recruitment. Dave Aranda as well, which is no surprise. Everyone talks about how great Dave Aranda really is as a coach, a recruiter, a person, and that really stood out to him. I know he basically told me he arrived on campus and it was over. I mean, he just knew immediately, and when that happens, that's why he committed so early in the weekend. He didn't wait at all to make that decision. He is completely locked in, and what he's going to bring to Baylor, I think, is versatility up front. He's already 6'3". I believe he's over 300 pounds after seeing him. I bet he's closer to maybe 310 right now. And so I think he can possibly play the nose tackle position. I think that's going to be a question mark because I know Baylor wants big size there. I mean, we're talking 330 there. So we'll see if he can get up to that weight, but I do know he's going to be a guy who can play all 3 positions on the defensive line. Dennis Johnson really excited about that aspect of Trey Emery, and I think that kind of versatility is huge, especially when you look at their class and they have no defensive linemen currently committed with the decommitment of Cedric Roberts about a month ago. Trey becomes the first defensive lineman in this class, and that's an area they really have to grow and develop. They are behind in the development portion of the defensive line. I think they really need to grow some depth there, and that's what Trey Emery is going to bring to them.
Well, they had depth as of a couple years ago, and then Gabe Hall kept getting hurt over and over again, and then you had just guys who haven't really, like I think of a Harrison White. You just haven't heard much about him in the last couple seasons, and I know he was somebody that Matt Rhule was really high on. And, you can just kind of go down the list of guys who are kind of tweener, not quite having make that jump, or they're, the Chidio Benayas and those guys, but there's only like 3 or 4 of those guys.
Right. That's the issue. Yeah. You can name 3 or 4 who you feel really, comfortable with if they're healthy.
Yeah.
I think that's the big thing. The other guys have some sort of question marks about them. And so, they really need to load up in this class on the defensive line. And I think Trey is a great start to that. I think this weekend, and we'll get into it when we talk about it, they have 3 defensive linemen coming on an official visit this weekend. So I think they're going to have a great opportunity to build this class out a little bit more.
So Trey Emery at Mount Pleasant is commit number 2 from last week. Moving on. The wide receiver position was hit for the first time in a good way. It was big old 0 next to wide receiver if you looked at Baylor's class breakdown. But that is no longer the case. Jordan Neighbors out of the Rockwall area, Rockwall Heath High School, 5'11", 180. He had offers from Penn State, Boise State, Colorado, UConn, East Carolina, Florida State, Michigan State, Mississippi State, Tennessee, Tulane, Tulsa, Utah, UTSA, Syracuse. I could go on. I don't need to. Offer guy, there's another one. There's another long offer list for you. Jordan Neighbors, wideouts, Rockwall Heath, first commit in this class for that position. What do you like about him?
Yeah, I've mentioned Jordan a ton, and it's really tough to say, okay, he was the top dude on their board. You don't really go into it necessarily saying, okay, he was for sure the top guy, but I can tell you the moment he was offered, he was a priority like no other. This staff wanted him really, really badly. His testing times very similar to Corey Coleman. And I know that's where a lot of the comparisons come from. James Blanchard posted a tweet right before he committed of a highlight of Corey Coleman as well. So you kind of see that comparison, and it's pretty accurate. I mean, a 4.43 40 time, 4.14 shuttle, both very elite, 36.5-inch vertical as well. So a ton of explosiveness, and a guy who obviously has a great offer list, but he doesn't have the huge offers in the state of Texas. And a huge reason for that is because he's technically viewed as the second guy on his team. Because at Rockwall Heath, they have another really good receiver named Jay Fair, who's got all the attention, all the publicity, put up a huge year, had like 20 receiving touchdowns last year. So I think Neighbors people don't necessarily talk about him or think about him as much, but 38 receptions for 726 yards and 9 touchdowns. So when he did get opportunities, he really flashed on film. I think he's going to have a huge year. I think he'll have over 1,000 yards, probably 10 plus touchdowns during his senior season, and everyone's going to feel really, really good about him, except for the schools that didn't offer him. And I think this is a huge hit for Baylor. I mean, Jordan Neighbors, perfect fit, in my opinion, for what they're trying to do at the wide receiver position under Chance Stuckey.
So wide receivers now got a member, and they will continue to grow that group, of course, as part of this recruiting class. How many receivers do you think they take?
I think they're going to take 3. Yeah, I think they'll take 3. And you also have to remember there's probably some guys in there from the weekend who maybe don't count towards wide receiver necessarily. A guy like Major Everhart, he's really an offensive weapon. So if you took a guy like that, you could classify him as a running back or a wide receiver. But I think straight up wide receivers, they'll take 3. And there's another one visiting this weekend. So, yeah, I mean, they really – I think they're in a great spot to fill out those 3 wide receiver positions, no problem. I don't think they're going to have to put out another offer, to be honest.
So, Neighbors is commit number 3, and they were not done there. As yesterday, we'd get number 4 from the last few days in, as this class just grows and grows and grows, with the floodgates now open, with camps fully operational following the – winding down of pandemic rules, and this was a pretty big one to close out this particular recruiting week. George Maye out of South Jordan, Utah, big old offensive lineman, nearly 300 pounds, 6'4". Hey, offer guy, you're going to be happy about this one too. Boise State, BYU, Colorado, Nebraska, Oregon, Oregon State, TCU, Tennessee, Northwestern, UCLA, USC, Utah, Washington State. Definitely coming out of Pac-12 country, so Pac-12 schools certainly took notice. But right now he wants to play his college football in Waco, Texas. He told us he was listening to some George Strait on his visit over the weekend, and said that it just country music sounds different when you're in the state of Texas, which was a fun comment. But he's got a big personality, not drawing direct conclusions because of where they come from, but kind of has a Siaki Ika vibes as far as like kind of the laid back sort of late nature of his voice. Noticed they were hanging out on the recruiting visit as well. He told us that he had a whole bunch of shrimp and had lobster for the first time ever. He had never had lobster before. He ended up having 4 lobster tails on his visit, so he enjoyed that immensely. So all in all, it was a good weekend. So good he decided to commit. So this one kind of out of nowhere, I would say, or surprising. How would you describe it?
Yeah, this was the one that was a little bit of a surprise. Not necessarily that Baylor had a really good relationship with him. We'd always talked about that. Eric Mateos did a great job building this relationship. Same with Jeff Grimes, and they built it at BYU, obviously. And then when they got to Baylor, they offered him pretty much immediately. And so that relationship, that connection was always there. But I felt like coming into the visit, it was pretty much a foregone conclusion that it was going to be USC or Oregon. And it just simply did not turn out that way. Baylor got him on campus. He fell in love with campus. He obviously has a great relationship with Apu Ika, who was his host for the visit. And I think people underestimate that relationship. And I think it's very similar to what you talked about with Trey Emery, talking about Mount Pleasant. Well, in Utah, it's like the state of Utah. And Apu Ika was one of those top 300 guys in the entire country, the number 1 player out of Utah in his class, and people just know who he is. And I think that was one of those things where that made the experience that much better. And Apu did a great job. So not only is Apu going to be one of the top, 2 or 3 defensive players on this roster, he's also turning out to be one of the better recruiters on the roster as well as a player. So this was great. George is going to be a huge pickup for this team. He is only the second composite 4-star in the class, along with Kyan Roberts-Day, who's already committed. So now you have your second one as far as composite goes. And so George is going to be a guy who will fill in the offensive guard position, in my opinion, at 6'4", 290 pounds, probably closer to 300 after the weekend. And I think he'll be a very good player for this team. And I actually got a question in my chat this week asking me who I thought the starting offensive line would be during the 2023 season. So not this year or the year after.
People are sick in the head, man.
I know.
People are sick in the head.
I get all these questions, but it was funny because it was actually 2 days before he committed, and I actually put him as the starter at right guard for 2023. So that would be his redshirt, freshman year? Yeah, redshirt freshman, redshirt. 2023? Yeah, redshirt freshman year.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I just thought that was kind of interesting that I currently have him there. We'll see. I mean, it's a long way down the road. Sure.
Yeah, it is 2 years away. So it's safe to say, like, he's got to sign his national letter of intent first, and he's got to kind of play another season before that, and then we'll get to 2023. So yeah, it's a little far out to be asking that question, but I do enjoy the passion that people have.
Well, and it was giving him a little prediction. I mean, if you saw it, I dropped a little hint there by having him in the starting lineup.
Yeah. Well, they're at 14 now, and this will be a class that's at least 20, probably over that, because, I mean, you're already saying 2 more receivers, probably another offensive lineman, potentially. I mean, they're at 5 now, but you've said before they could possibly go up to 6.
I mean, look at defensive back. I mean,
they don't have any defensive backs. They've got 1 defensive lineman. They've got, they got 1 linebacker. So, yeah, there's some work to be done still, but they're running out of room in a way. Although there's always attrition that can take place, of course, that frees up a scholarship or 2. And they know what they're doing, obviously. But I did notice where Zach Pyron, quarterback commit, was on campus with his family over the weekend, and his mom had a really sweet message about their commitment to Baylor and how they're just more sold than ever. I saw the mother of who was that? Kelsey Johnson, the tight end commit. She had a comment or a post on Twitter that was very much in the same vein of, being committed and being happy about where they are. So that's one thing, is they're not just, recruiting the uncommitted. They're also recruiting the committed players still and continuing to do that, and will continue to do that. And it appears as though they did a pretty good job with at least a couple of the takeaways that I saw from family members.
Yeah, amazing weekend, I would say, for commits and uncommitted prospects. I think everyone on the visit they all fell more in love with Baylor. And you could kind of see it coming. The writing was on the wall that something like this was going to happen and that Baylor was going to take this visit weekend extremely seriously, and they did. Now, does that mean they're going to land everyone who was on the visit? No, probably not. But I will say they put themselves in a much better position with every single recruit that was on campus. And I think that this class is it's building into something. And I mean, right now, I posted a tweet. They are the number 13 ranked class in the entire country. At least they were when Maya committed yesterday, when he did during the day, and they were ranked ahead of Alabama and Clemson. Obviously, it's early. They will not finish ahead of those two schools.
They will not finish ahead of those schools. They will not.
I'm just going to preface that. But currently they are ranked ahead of them. So I found that to be a pretty interesting little nugget.
That's nice. Nice.
It's a nice place to be, right?
Yeah, it will not continue that way.
It sure won't.
And the thing is like, until you're winning national titles and you're in the playoff year after year, you're never going to finish ahead of Alabama and Clemson. But the goal for a school like Baylor is to finish ahead of the Oklahoma States and the TCUs and those schools, and then you worry about the rest of them. But flirt with being like the 3rd best recruiting school in the Big 12, which right now I'd probably say is like Iowa State or TCU.
Oklahoma State.
State, too. Yeah. I mean, they're all the same, basically. They're just different colors. And, it's like just switch places, basically. Any given year, it's like the same 3-4 schools that are all battling for the 3rd best recruiter. It was Baylor a couple years ago, and it was TCU one year. Now it's Iowa State or it's Oklahoma State. So, basically, beat those schools out and you're going to be in a really good spot.
Yeah,
you
definitely.
finish with the third best Big 12 class every year, you're going to be in a really good spot.
And usually the third team in the Big 12 is going to be right around top 25.
Yes.
And so if Baylor can get to right around top 25, that's the goal every year, is to be right around top 25 and maybe have that crazy year, which I expect to be 2023, where you somehow are able to finish maybe right at 20 or right in there.
Yeah, a top 25 class is a win for Baylor. I mean, it's not
That's a massive one.
common.
Yeah.
It sounds like it would probably be simple, but it's really not, because they've barely ever finished in the top 25 while I've been covering them, which has been for several years now. Here's off topic. I'm not going to be on the Connolly broadcast this year. We will be doing Midway. Had a lot of fun doing Connolly last year. We will have Connolly broadcasts. I just won't be doing the sidelines. Instead, I'll be over in Hewitt. But a player that I really enjoyed watching at Connolly last year, one Trey Wisner, who still has a couple years of high school left. I just saw that he will be taking an unofficial to Baylor tomorrow. So just a local note there. And there are some local notes. It turns out Marlin, Texas is apparently like Lotto Central for future recruits. I don't know how that happened out of nowhere, but they have some prospects now, which bodes well for Baylor, although it's mostly 2023 and beyond. But they're starting to be that 2023 class in Central Texas, man, with Trey Wisner. You've got Mikal Harrison Pilot out of Temple, who I saw him on some visit yesterday out of
Alabama.
state. Yeah, I was at Alabama. And then you've got Gillette out of Marlin, and there's a couple of others.
Wilson out of Marlin as well.
Wilson from there. So, I mean, that's like a handful of guys already. That's a quarter of a recruiting class or a fifth of a recruiting class that you've already offered. It could potentially get less than 30 miles away from you. So that's something to keep in mind in the class of 2023 that'll be coming up. But Trey Wisner will be one of those guys, although he will have a new head coach next year. Shane Anderson does move from Connolly over to Midway. Sorry for the cadet community, but selfishly kind of happy about that, because that'll be cool to go reunite over at Midway. So there was a recruiting weekend, and Grayson, before we get into some of the other non-recruiting news, there is another weekend coming up. Well, here in just a couple of days. So, massive weekend on tap. Preview it for us a little, if you would.
Okay, so, I mean, this next weekend is pretty much going to be a major defensive weekend. I mean, if you look at kind of the breakdown right now, they have 3 defensive linemen visiting, 2 linebackers, a cornerback, and 2 safeties. And these are all uncommitted prospects. They also have a wide receiver and 1 offensive lineman who aren't committed. As far as the commits go, Bryce Simpson will be on the visit, big-time offensive lineman out of Cy Ranch, Lubbock Cooper athlete, Kyler Jordan. Don't really know where he's going to play yet. I would say it seems like things are trending towards linebacker, so a really nice visit for him.
Really? He was a tight end, wasn't he? Or am I thinking of somebody else?
Yeah, he plays defensive end at Lubbock Cooper.
Oh, defensive end is what I was thinking of.
Yeah, and so a lot of people think he'll stay there, and it's very possible that he'll end up being a defensive end, but I kind of see him possibly in that Dylan Doyle mold if he can move well enough. That's going to be the biggest challenge and kind of thought process with him. And then obviously if you look at the other guys on this trip, I mean, it's interesting. Only 2 commits are on this trip right now. And so I think they're really going to have to do a good job at kind of bringing this group together. Zach Pyron did a great job of that last weekend. Same with Trey Emery and Jordan Neighbors. They did a great job too, even though they technically weren't committed the entire weekend. They were really hyping up Baylor. Kyan Roberts-Day did a great job of that as well. And so looking at the rest of this group, guys that you really need to pay attention to, Gladewater wide receiver DJ Allen. He's another wide receiver in this class who Baylor's been recruiting for a long time, and a guy who I do think there's a good chance that he could end up in this class, and he would be a huge pickup for this Baylor recruiting staff if they're able to land him. Coppell offensive lineman Alvin Ebosele, need to bring him up because Baylor currently does not have a left tackle in this class, and Alvin has been their top left tackle target since day one. They got to make up, it's not even really making up some ground here, but they really need to do their best at closing this deal. They need a left tackle in this class. I think Alvin fits that mold really well. I mentioned 3 defensive linemen. The big nugget there is Cedric Roberts, Pflugerville Hendrickson, defensive lineman. He was a Baylor commit. decommitted, and now he will be back on campus. A great opportunity for Baylor to maybe get him back in this class. So we'll see how that unfolds over the weekend. And then a lot of defensive backs highlighted by Jalen Peoples, the Cedar Hill cornerback. Obviously, it's been a very interesting recruitment. He's had 4 different commitment dates, has been on 4 or 5 official visits now. Almost all of them are done. And now he's coming to Baylor on what's supposed to be his last official visit before making a decision in early July or late June. We'll see which one he goes with there. But yeah, Baylor's in a great position there. I mean, he's got a great relationship with Joey McGuire, of course, and now Baylor really just needs to finish this one, because Peoples he's been on a lot of visits, he's talked to a lot of schools, and now it's just a matter of, will he make a decision after this weekend? We'll see, but it could be a big one for this class.
Do you have any type of temperature gauge on what you're expecting? Are you expecting a commit, couple commits, weekend like last weekend?
So the problem with this group is that some of these guys have dates set for making a commitment, and it just so happens to be, a week or 2 after the visit. So are you going to let me count those or no?
Sure.
We'll count those? Okay. I see... How bold do you want me to get?
I mean, I want you to be realistic with the people out there listening. I want you to pump their heads up and get false hope, but
I mean, I could honestly see as many as 7 of these uncommitted prospects being in Baylor's 2022 class eventually. I really think they're in that good of a position with the guys that they have on this visit. I don't think they brought these guys in as guys, we're just trying to get back in it.
Right.
A lot of these guys Baylor's in great positions with. I mean, I'll say 7 right now. I think the realistic number is probably 5. But I mean, 7's realistic. I just mean the higher probability and it being maybe closer to when they went on their visit, probably 5. But I would say there's probably only 2 guys I would consider long shots on the visit. Maybe only 1, to be honest. So yeah, I'm expecting huge things, from probably even bigger than last weekend.
All right. Well, you heard it here first, and you'll hear it throughout the rest of the week as well on the Sikkim 365 premium boards. If you were craving more and more recruiting last weekend and you are not a member of Sikkim 365, well, what are you doing? That's a good way to go and get your fill and much more. You can peruse the boards, a variety of different topics, but a whole lot of recruiting and a whole lot of discussion on the young men who committed last weekend and the activities coming up this weekend. So do take advantage and sign up just in time for the big swing in recruiting. And I mean, don't look now, but less than 3 weeks away from Big 12 Media Days. And it's just a hop, skip, and a jump to the start of the season and fall camp after that. So pretty good time to go on and become a member if you haven't already, because things are picking up, to be sure, especially on the recruiting side of things, as Dave Aranda and his staff seemingly have hit their groove and look like they're going to be a pretty adept staff at recruiting as well. We've seen Matt Rhule have some success. Would have had a heck of a lot more if he had stuck around, but it is what it is. We saw Bryles have success towards the end. Jim Grobe obviously didn't have a recruiting class, so he doesn't count. But it's been proven you can recruit well at Baylor, and we had high hopes for Dave Rand and his staff. And with a little tweaking, it looks like they are, like I said, hitting a nice groove. So better move along, because we do have other things to discuss. But we'll have all sorts of football discussion over on the premium side of things. On the basketball side, Matthew Meyer, no surprise. Although a surprise perhaps to some, I was expecting him to come back to Baylor. I just think it makes more sense in the long run. I know there's always the risk of, knock on wood, injuries, things like that. But given what he could be next year with a solid year of college versus if he had just gone out right now, I think ultimately it's the right choice, because there's so much more that he can do in the role that he will be playing next season. But he does, in fact, make the decision to come back to Baylor. There was kind of a funny moment with he and his agent, where initially that first report had come out from whatever site that was, whoever had it out there like yesterday early, that he was coming back. That wasn't necessarily the case at the time, but eventually it did settle on him coming back to Baylor. So totally unexpected, but obviously massive news for Scott Drew and company.
Yeah, and he needed to come back. I mean, let's be real here. I love Matthew Meyer, and I think he's a very, very good player, but I have not seen nearly enough for me to say he's an NBA player.
It's the NBA draft. That's what they do. They go off a lot of potential.
They do, but also he was not going to be a first-round pick. I mean, he just wasn't.
The Mavericks drafted Wang Zhuzhu, who never played a minute of basketball for them. So the NBA, like, I'm just saying, I know what you mean. He's not. He should not be. It should not even been a question. It should not even have been a question. But it is because it's the NBA draft.
Yeah, and I know. But a guy like probably Wang Zhuzhu was like 19. I mean, Matthew
he was
Myers,
like 7'7" is what he was.
And he was 19. I think Matthew Myers, 21 now because he's a junior.
I've tried to forget about Wang Zhuzhu.
Yeah, I would too. Yeah, not a great pick. And there's a lot of those in the NBA draft, which just kind of goes further to the point that
I think China just hacked my computer. Actually,
probably did. They haven't heard that name in 7 years.
Got totally rattled by that.
But I'm really. This was such a great decision by him. I'm glad he's coming back. I think this is going to make Baylor one of the better teams in college basketball once again. I think preseason ranking, they're going to be a top 5 team, as they should be. And Matthew Meyer has a great chance to really up his draft stock and really turn into one of the better players in the Big 12. You know, a lot of people are talking about him possibly being a preseason Big 12 Player of the Year candidate. So, I mean, that's a lot of expectations to live up to, I think. But I do believe him coming back, showing that efficiency again, continuing to up his game with more consistency, I think will be key. And also, of course, trying to eliminate the bad turnovers that he has or the bad decisions he does have at some times. But I will say, I think Scott Drew and staff got to be so excited to have another veteran back in the room and a guy who can really lead this team to another Final Four appearance, maybe even a national title, possibility. And so I think what I look at for this team is you see guys like Kendall Brown and Langston Love and Jeremy Sohan coming in and possibly having to play big roles. You want to have older guys and you want to have stability still on the roster. And that's exactly what Matthew Meyer will bring back to Baylor.
Yeah, he brings a level of excitement, unpredictability, but also skill. So he's definitely someone with some room to grow in his game, and I think he will thrive with another year of coaching Scott Drew, Jerome Tang, Alvin Brooks, all the rest of the guys on that staff. So smart decision, although I know it had to be, tempting to at least see what the other side looks like. But I think that other side would have a lot greener grass and a lot more green just in general if he does what he can do this year and then makes that choice. And then I don't think anybody will have any doubts about that being the smart decision. So there's Matthew Meyer making his call, and now Baylor basketball knows what it's going to look like next year. That's the last of the decisions to be made, and kind of all the dominoes fell pretty much how you thought that they would. Who you thought would probably leave left, and who you thought would probably stayed, and they got a good recruiting class coming in. Meanwhile, we got the Olympics next month in Japan. Who knows what the heck that's going to look like? Certainly not full capacity. It's just a weird world, and a lot of people coming from all over the world to travel to one place for the first time in a long time. We've got some people spooked and curious about whether or not this should be going on, but regardless, the Olympic Games is going on. And as a matter of fact, there will be 4 Baylor representatives at the Olympic Games coming up. Brittany Griner for women's basketball. She's been a mainstay now for a while, but on the track and field side, a trio of Bears will be over in Tokyo. And Trayvon Bromell is going to be a favorite to perhaps capture 100-meter Olympic gold over in Tokyo. He should be the favorite. That's what the legendary Clyde Hart told us yesterday on Sikkim 365 radio. With the way that he's been running all year, he's been the most impressive, sprinter in his category in all of 2021. He's been undefeated, had obviously a couple years of injuries that set him back and gave him a lot of problems. And, some wondered if he was ever going to be quite what he was expected to be. He's on his way. He's an Olympian, wins the trials this past weekend, so he will be representing Team USA in the 100 meters. Also, Casey Lightfoot qualified yesterday in pole vaulting, so he will be headed to the Olympic Games. And I saved, the local kid for last, Waco's own Will London. He is the first Olympian from Waco, according to Clyde Hart. And Clyde Hart said that he thinks that's something that should be recognized, and I agree with him. It's one thing to be the kid in the college town who goes off to the Olympics, but you were from like the other side of the state, or you moved in from California. That's all well and good, and that's still great. But as far as being from Waco, Will London is the first. He also happens to be a Baylor guy as well, and I'm very happy for that young man. So he qualifies for the relay, and he will be with 4x400 relay. I need to double check on that.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Okay,
4x4.
Yeah, 4x4. I want to make sure I got that right. So, yeah, Will London in the 4x4 relay, Lightfoot in the pole vaulting. Trayvon Bromell obviously will be sprinting out there and a favorite to win the gold. I mean, man, and then you had Griner in there, and that's not bad, man. 4 reps. I mean, you'll have your Stanfords and your UCLAs. I had somebody go like, well, nobody else can possibly have that many. And I'm thinking, well, Texas's diving team alone might have like 5 Olympians, or certainly the Pac-12 schools that play all the Olympic sports are going to have a bunch of reps. But for the middle of the country and a state that doesn't ever see snow hardly, winter sports are kind of out of the equation. But on the summer side, track and field has been very kind, and basketball has as well, and it'll be kind again this summer, hopefully.
Yeah, and I'd love to look at the most watched events, but I think the 100 meters got to be up there in track.
For sure.
And so to have a guy, I mean, Trayvon Bromell, I mean, how cool is that? And he was in school when I was in school at Baylor, and I know one of my best friends texted me and was like, wow, lab partner to possible gold medalist. Just one of those weird things that could possibly be happening, and I really hope it does. I mean, who was the last Baylor track athlete to win a gold medal? Jeremy Warner, yeah. And then before him, Michael Johnson, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so I mean, it would put him in legendary status as far as, you want to talk about who are the best Baylor athletes of all time. If he goes out and wins a gold medal in the 100 meter, I mean, he definitely puts his name in there. He had a great career at Baylor as well, and I'm so happy that he got healthy because he had so much potential at Baylor, and you saw it. And then obviously he qualified for the Olympics as a 20-year-old. When he ran against Usain Bolt, obviously didn't go well there, got injured, and now he's back. I'm just thrilled for him. He's the favorite. He's the odds-on favorite to win the 100. That would be amazing. As far as Will London and Casey Lightfoot, really cool stories there as well, to just see them be able to qualify and get their shot so early in their careers as well. I think that's an amazing opportunity, and Baylor fans definitely need to pay attention to the Olympics coming up. It's going to be a fun time.
Yeah, Bromell could, really just tear it up in the 100 meters. That's an event that everybody, that's one of those you actually make appointment television to watch the 100.
Yeah.
That's one event I will go out of my way to make sure that I watch that.
Are you going up to Japan for the... Are you covering it?
I thought I might just, hop in the car and, jump over the pond real quick. No, I do. Japan is at the top of my list of countries I would like to go to.
For sure.
If that's, even possible in the future. But, Japan would be right up there. Not for the Olympics, though. It's a little too much of a crowd for me. Back in 2016, the last Rio Games, Trayvon Bromell was there. He participated in the 100 meters, and he also participated in the 4x100 relay. Didn't bring home any gold. Brittany Griner did win a gold with Team USA.
Yeah.
They also had 2 international representatives. John Peers played men's tennis doubles representing Team Australia, did not medal. And Leticia D'Souza, track and field, she was on the Brazilian 4x400 relay team. She did not medal either, but they were other, and I have not heard of any international representatives from Baylor, just the 4 Team USA members, but they have had some in the past.
What did Bromell run? It doesn't say on there.
No.
Okay. Yeah, I just was curious because he's running sub 10.8 now, so I was just kind of trying to think how.
He's running faster now, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
I'm sorry, sub 9.8. My bad.
Yeah, he's running faster now, and like Clyde Hart said, he should be a favorite to win a gold. So Olympics-wise, that's where we are. And Grayson, anything else before we get into the mailbag this week?
Let's dive into the mailbag. We got quite a few questions.
All right. So if you got it, go ahead and pull it up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I got it. So Statboy has the first questions. Who will be the highest drafted Baylor football player in the 2022 NFL draft? That is next year's NFL draft. 2021 was this year. So the highest drafted Baylor football player.
Terrell Bernard, or if he has a monster year, no, probably still Terrell Bernard. I was thinking maybe a Tyquan Thornton if he had just a massive year, but I think that's even stretching it big time because there's a lot of Tyquan Thorntons out there. I think Terrell Bernard.
Yeah, I think Bernard would probably be my pick. The guy who I'm thinking of, if he has a massive year, could be the guy is actually Caleb Barnes.
Yeah.
I'm
just kind of tired of saying that one, actually.
I know. He had a good year last year, but I think if he had a huge year, I think we all just kind of talk about, he's going to go run a 4.3 at the combine, so he's going to get drafted no matter what. But he has to have a big year. If he does, he could be that guy who kind of ascends from this Baylor program. Kind of, he's kind of having it. I'm not saying it's the same, but how Xavier Howard kind of went under the radar and that was mainly because the offense was so good. I'm not saying Kalen's getting, underlooked like Xavier did, but I'm finding some similarities there. Tejada is considered the number one, everything like that. So if he comes out, has a big year, I don't know. He could be the guy.
Yeah, I think I've told this story before on the podcast. I'll be short with it here. But the year that they went to, I guess that would have been the Russell Athletic Bowl, Xavier Howard's last year. Yeah. Before they left for Orlando, they had a media session at the bank. And it was odd because they don't really have media sessions there. But that time they did. And so everybody was like on Christmas break at the time or about to be or something like that. I just remember it was weird, like on a weekend. And we go up there to do this group interview session, and Xavier Howard's one of the guys that was there, and me and a former host are talking to him, and he's talking about like making an NFL draft decision and like may or may not come back next year, and we're like, what are you talking about coming back? Like, what are you talking about? Had no idea that he was even being seriously considered for the NFL draft. And then like 4 months later, he was a borderline first-round pick. It was wild.
Yeah.
It was wild. Because I don't remember even thinking about that before then.
Right. One of my buddies told me when he walked onto the football team that Corey Coleman beat everyone in every single drill. And he was, like, mean about it. You know what I mean? Like, he was serious about beating everyone. And the only guy who gave him issues was Xavier Howard. Yeah. And they would be put up against each other every day. And, I mean, that's the reason why they were so good. I mean, you put best on best, that's what happened. So, yeah, I don't know. I could see something like that for Kalen. He obviously has to make huge strides this year, but I could see it. Also asked how many will be drafted.
So like a handful, probably. I mean, Terrell Bernard, Tyquan Thornton.
If he leaves,
yeah. I mean, that's RJC, the thing too, man. Is like there's the whole free year thing, and so it's like, I mean, I don't even know what class guys are in anymore half the time.
Petrie, maybe if he runs well,
maybe
he'd have to run really well.
Maybe Tejada, maybe
Ebner again have to run really well.
Yeah, Ebner I think could definitely be a pick if he showcases enough this year. His versatility I think is obvious when you watch the tape, but
the pass catching,
he's got to be like consistently good week in and week out to separate himself from other guys. And I mean, there's a lot of running backs out there. You got to separate yourself and be special, and I think he is, but I think he's got to show that as well. So I think
Siaki Ika, maybe. I don't know why he would.
I mean, like I said, probably 4 or 5. Probably 4 or 5, because I think we've named 4 to 5 guys, and all of them would potentially. And I know there's probably another couple guys.
I guess Ika has to stay one more.
Yeah, he's got a couple more.
Yeah, he's got to stay 2. But
Bernard, Thornton, Barnes, but Tejada. Maybe. But then again, who also comes back from, like a Kalen Barnes, for example. So 4 or 5.
Connor Galvin, like what's the super seniors that could come back? Yeah. Okay, next question. I got what single game will be the closest win this season for Baylor?
Iowa State. I don't have an answer off the top of my head. I'm not thinking about the schedule next year all that much, to be perfectly honest with you.
I think the closest win for the Bears on the schedule, there's this stretch in their schedule where they play Texas, TCU, and Oklahoma. And we've talked about this stretch before, and I think they're going to get one of those games. I really do. I don't think they're going to lose 3 in a row on their schedule, but I'm finding the TCU and Oklahoma ones to be very unlikely. So I'm kind of circling that Texas game. I think everyone is kind of anticipating that Steve Sarkisian is just going to come in and they're going to have all this success, and it's going to be really easy to just become a head coach at Texas, and it's all going to be fine and dandy. But I don't see that happening year one. I do think he's a good coach. I think obviously he did great things at Alabama. But I think Baylor
hasn't.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So I think that Baylor can beat them, but I do think it will be a close game. And I think the Bears are going to get up for that one. So yeah, circle October 30th. I got the Bears beating Texas in a really, really close game.
I'm going to stick with Iowa State, actually. Looking at it, that's their first Big 12 non-conference game. It's in Waco. They'll be 3-0 after playing Texas State, Texas Southern, and Kansas. And I know that those are three teams that are going to probably make you feel like you're king of the world, even though you've been fighting with pillows the entire time. But, I mean, still momentum is momentum, and you're going to be at home. Nearly knocked them off next year. I mean, I kind of just said that to say something, but now I'm looking at it. I think that could actually be an upset spot. Maybe too early in the year for Iowa State to be on upset alert, but I'm not going to rule it out, man. Like, I think anybody trying to make any sort of a firm determination on this team, one way or the other, is just setting themselves up to be surprised this year, because I don't think there's enough there to say that they're definitely going to be great. I think they're going to be much better than they were last year, but I also think there's a lot of people that are down on them, that are just expecting them to get rolled by the Iowa States and those schools, and I don't think that's necessarily going to be the case, because this defense isn't going to be massively worse, and this offense is not going to be as bad as it was. So I kind of like them flying under the radar a little bit, honestly. But I will go with Iowa State just because it's early on.
Last question from Stat Boy. Can you remind me what time y'all air live? So I know, because obviously we haven't had up tempo that's kind of leading up. I still think it's 2 though, right? I still
For this
think
podcast?
that it airs on YouTube. I think the official air date's 2, right, Armstrong, when it first gets posted? Yeah, so Armstrong's telling me 2.
But the question is, we don't air live, so, but 2, whatever.
2 is when it premieres, I guess you'd say.
I don't know. Is it 2? 2?
Yeah, it's 2.
Okay,
yeah.
Well, there you go. So
2 on YouTube.
Coach to broker, how is this past weekend different than other recruiting weekends? Also, how has it improved relationships with other potential prospects?
Yeah, I mean, this has been I'm not going to say, as far as different goes, I'm not going to say that a lot of what they did was entirely different from the previous staff, because it really wasn't. I mean, it was very similar, but the relationships that you kind of that we've mentioned a lot have been the difference. And the organization of the recruitment structure that they have with Vince Ginta and James Blanchard, Aaron Hunt, Brian Nance, they've just done a really, really good job at kind of putting these events on, and also just really taking care of these recruits and making them feel really special on the visit, them and their families. I think when you have great relationships built in, and then you get to meet guys in person for the first time, it just becomes that much better. And that's kind of what this weekend did for a lot of people. As far as how has this weekend improved relationships with other potential prospects, I think we pretty much covered that at the beginning, just kind of talking about, what they did on the recruitment weekend. I assume you mean the guys who were on the visit, because it didn't really improve relationships with people that weren't on the visit. But they are definitely in a better position. I can see probably 2 or 3 more guys from the weekend committing, maybe even more than that. I mean, this class is filling up rather quickly. The Baylor staff has, again, just done a really, really good job focusing in on their priority prospects.
ZT Smith 423, do you think Baylor's biggest recruiting advantage on official and unofficials is just the relationships they build?
Ooh, biggest advantage. Yeah, I mean, the relationships are definitely one of the biggest advantages. I think that they have a lot to sell to, and I think the 2-win season is obviously not one of the things that is going in their favor right now, but Dave Aranda's put a lot of guys in the NFL, and it really, really intrigues the defensive players in the class. I mean, he does not, I don't think people realize all the linebackers and defensive backs and defensive linemen who played under him who are playing in the NFL right now. And when he can show recruits that is definitely a huge advantage. You also have to remember Dennis Johnson was at LSU as well, so he was a part of that. And I think when you add in the fact that they have really good recruiters, and you also add in the fact that they have really good personalities on their staff, those are the things that have really been a huge advantage for them, and seem like they'll continue to be a huge advantage for this Baylor staff as well going forward.
Scotty B, the Baylor Kings, got a few questions. How do you view the recent men's tennis transfers, Jacob Brum and Cole Gromley, and helping contribute next year?
Yeah, I think they're both going to be probably lower line players. I like what both do in the doubles department as well. I think that's where you might see one of them have a bigger impact there than on singles, probably Gromley. But yeah, Brum's really, really good player. I think both are going to have huge roles, and both will be in their starting rotation next year to some extent. The question is, will they both be singles starters, or will one be a starter and then the other just be a doubles replacement type guy? I think that's to be determined. But yeah, big pickups. I think they're just committed right now, so I don't think anything's official yet. At least I don't think I've gotten anything from Baylor that's officially said they've been added to the roster. So I'd wait on that.
If you had to point out a weakness on the Baylor defense this season, what would it be?
I think it kind of goes hand in hand. So I think if I'm looking at the defense, especially the defensive line, it's really the issue of, do they have guys that can get after the quarterback and really force negative plays? And to go along with that, if they don't, are their safeties going to be good enough to hold up on the back end in coverage if they're not getting a ton of pressure on the quarterback, if that makes sense? So really my areas of concern are the safeties giving up explosive plays and the ability of the defensive line to create pressure on the quarterback without having to bring, 5 blitzers. Can they get home with just 3? At times, just like the team in 2019 was able to do. They were able to drop everyone back because Bravion Roy, James Lynch, and James Lockhart were able to get after pretty much any quarterback with just 3 guys. You're allowed to drop back, and that way you don't give up big explosive plays, and you can also force turnovers because you can see the entire field.
I'd say that also very little depth at safety. They got very little depth in certain spots, proven depth, and I think that could be something that could maybe be a little bit of an Achilles heel. One more from Scotty B, and then we got a couple more. We need to wrap this up. What do you think are the weaknesses of the OU and Iowa State defenses going into next year?
So I think if you're looking at the Oklahoma roster, the area that I think is a concern for them is the cornerbacks. Now, I will say they both did start in the bowl game against Florida, and they played really well, but I still am not entirely sold. They're still starting newer guys there, and I think that's where they'll maybe run into issues. The good news for them is they have 2 returning safeties that have played quite a bit of snaps. They have a great linebacking group and defensive line. Everyone's anticipating this Oklahoma defense to be the best they've had in a long, long time. Probably the best they've had under Lincoln Riley, to be honest. Now, as far as Iowa State goes, I didn't know this stat, but over their last 5 games, they gave up 16 combined second-half points. That's pretty amazing. Their defense is absolutely loaded. They return pretty much everyone. I mean, you look at Bailey and McDonald up front. Those 2 guys are going to wreak havoc in backfields. They have great depth at corner, an elite linebacker, all Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year candidate, Mack Rhoades at linebacker, and then Greg Eisworth at safety, who's very good. So they are very, very loaded at every position. My question for them, and it's always going to be my question with Iowa State, yes, they have a lot of really good players who everyone likes to talk about, but how talented are they really? You're talking about guys who are 3-star recruits, and yes, 3-star recruits can turn into really, really good players, but from position to position, are they really that good, or is it the scheme and all the guys playing really well together?
It's the scheme and all the guys playing really well together. I mean, that's what it is. So
for me, I think they can be exploited in one-on-one talent versus talent matchups, and that's where Baylor, I think, has had some success against them, and so that's where I think they can be exploited by the better teams.
I'm telling you right now, I'm not afraid of Iowa State. Like, they're good, fine. So are a lot of other teams, but this, if I'm Baylor, I'm not backing down a half inch with those guys rolling to town. You're Iowa State. Who cares? I mean, Baylor's got 2 Big 12 titles to their name, played for a 3rd just a couple of years ago, coming off a 1-11. They're beatable. They're not Alabama, and they're going to be really good, but they're going to be in Waco. So you got a chance to knock them off and set them off course early on. That would be my focus at least. Yeah. But they are going to be I'm not saying that to say they're not a good football team. They absolutely are. They are well coached, but they're not like a lock for the playoff in my mind. I'm just getting a little sick of the preseason love already for the Cyclones, and I'm having to kind of, take it easy right now because I know in the next month it's just going to go insane.
It is, with Big 12 Media Days.
Oh, yeah. We're just going to hear
them and OU. That's going to be the matchup. Everyone knows, right?
And Texas because now they've hired a new coach, so they're definitely back now. Because, it's fun to talk about that for 6 straight years and they did nothing, but now they really are back, and we got to hear about it for a 7th straight year.
Meanwhile, Gundy, Patterson, and Aranda are just sitting there keep talking about them. Yeah, please keep talking about those guys.
Go right ahead. All right, Sam 19 will close us out this week. Dumb thing to complain about, but why do we seem to take in an elite-level quarterback every signing class? Every quarterback except Shapen's Elite 11, with Pyron competing for that status. With these caliber of quarterbacks every class, it's looking like they'll maybe play a year or two at most. I get competition is good, but it seems like we're going to be breaking in a new QB every year for the next 5 if all these guys are going to see time as a starter.
I mean, you have to take the best quarterback available. It's not really about, why don't we take a really bad quarterback so there's no competition? I don't know what the game theory would be in that.
Well, I think he's looking at it from the player's point of view is why would you go commit to Baylor right now if they've got 3 guys who are all 1, 2, and 3 years older than you that are directly in front of you?
Okay, so, I mean, I'm reading it, why do we seem to take, and why does Baylor seem to take one every year?
I think he's asking why do they take a high-level quarterback every year and then it just stacks up. So if you're Zach Pyron, you come in and you got 4 dudes in front of you who all have varying degrees of eligibility. So, why do they bring in a Zach Pyron if they've already got Kyron Drones and 3 other guys on campus? That's what he's saying.
I mean, you recruit the best players you can, and you take a quarterback in every class because you never know what's going to happen. I mean, that's like Alabama not taking Ty Simpson.
Right, I think he's trying to figure out, but I think he's trying to figure out why, though. Why do they do that?
Because you have to.
But why do you have to, Grayson?
Okay, well, I guess you have to because guys will transfer. Yes. Guys will move on to next spots. Guys aren't as talented.
Flounder and not be as good.
Not as good as you think they will be. So you have to take the best guy available. That's the name of the game in recruiting. And at the quarterback position, it's the most important position on the field. So it's an absolute must. It's the same reason why Alabama, even with 2 other 5-stars on their roster, are still taking Ty Simpson in their class. I mean, that's just what you have to do nowadays, because if you pass on taking a quarterback in the class and he ends up being a number 1 overall pick or a first-round pick, then you've set yourself back 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, I think he's, also looking at it from the player standpoint of you're walking into a log jam and everybody's got their confidence levels, but still, it makes sense. There's only so many Bryce Pettys out there that are willing to sit around for 4 years before they finally get a crack at it. So I think from the viewpoint of a Zach Pyron, I know Zach Pyron thinks I'm going to come in and I'm going to start from day number 2. But you could also look at that and say, damn, I got to beat out this guy and this guy and this guy and this guy before I even get a chance to beat out this guy to be the man. So, Sam, that's recruiting. To answer your question.
Everywhere. It's not just a Baylor problem.
But it's a Baylor podcast we're doing. So,
right.
That's just college football recruiting to answer your question, is that you take one every year because there might be guys that wash out or get hurt, and you may have 5 quarterbacks, and in the blink of an eye because of the transfer portal, you're down to 2. Yeah. And you're screwed. So you got to have just full numbers all the time. And so that means every year you're taking a quarterback. Every year you're taking a couple of O-linemen, et cetera, et cetera. And for the quarterbacks, that's their choice to go. That's why some guys will say, no, I don't want to go to Alabama and sit for 3 years. I want to go to Liberty and start right away. Yeah. That's, again, recruiting. That's all recruiting. That's the game of recruiting. Alabama brings in a 4-star quarterback, if not a 5-star, every single year, and they'll do it every single year. So it's just the way that it is. It is kind of odd when you look at it from the outside, though. You're like, why is this guy going here? He's not going to play anytime soon. But, then every once in a while you get the freshman who comes in and beats out all the sophomores and juniors and seniors that you thought were going to be so good. And that guy turns out to be just a stud freshman. So, again.
That's what Trevor Lawrence did.
Exactly. Yeah. That's recruiting. And that's just part of the weird nature of it. So thank you, Sam, for the question there. And that will close us out in the mailbag. Thank you, Stat Boy, Coach the Brokers, E.T. Smith, Scotty B, and Sam for the questions this week. And Grayson will have a post up at some point later on in the week to get more in for the next podcast, as we are with you 50 out of 52 weeks of the year, pretty much. That's what it was last year. I think it was actually 51 out of 52. I think we missed maybe a couple this year, but we also dealt with an ice storm, various COVID cases, moving, you name it. And we've missed, I think, 2 or maybe 3 this so far halfway through the year. So do appreciate the support and appreciate all those all of you who listen every week. And definitely keep spreading the word. We've been doing this for a while now, but definitely a lot of people out there that still may not be aware of the podcast or the site or just what's going on in Waco. So pass along a kind note, if you would, and pass along those questions for next week when you see that post from Grayson here in a couple days. But anything before we go here?
No, just thanks to everyone who's listening and supporting us. And obviously on the premium side, there's so much recruiting content that's going out right now. That's pretty much going to be a lot of what drives the entire summer, and of course getting ready for fall camp, which I know everyone's really, really excited about. So be sure to check out the premium site if you haven't already.
Yes, camp news will be coming out this weekend. Plenty more of that. So good time of year to be on the site. Want to thank everybody here in studio, including Armstrong Sims, for producing, and for Grayson Grundhafer. I'm Craig Smoke. We will talk to you today at 3 for Sikkim 365 Radio. And, of course, the talk continues on 24/7 over at Sikkim365.com.